Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. I trust that you guys have a good night's sleep, waking up to engage a new day. Here in New Hampshire, as we're beginning our day, it's pretty windy and rainy and kind of mixed precipitation. But the news across the country seems that places are getting a whole lot of snow, and the weather seems to be as inclement as it is here. Maybe on your little chat this morning, you can say where you're from and what the weather looks like outside, because it looks pretty raw out there this morning. It's one of those moments when you're really grateful for a roof over your head and some heat in the house. But I'm glad through technology we get to warm it up a little bit by being together and just spending some time in the Word. We have been in a series now called Schooled, where we're looking at the words of Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount and allowing them to hopefully fall fresh on our ears again. We begin with Jesus making this declaration in chapter 4, verse 17, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. More than anything, I hope that in our studies together in this series, you begin to understand that what Jesus is doing is Jesus is beginning to announce the kingdom. So the kingdom that he is inaugurating has been a part of God's program from the very beginning, seeking to share with his people what it means to live under the rule of God. Heard a great illustration from someone when they talked about how in our present climate, when people said the White House, they'll make a statement like this. They'll say, the White House, today put out a report or put out a statement saying, and the White House can't talk, right? But the White House is representative of that authority, right? This executive authority of the office of the president. And so when Jesus is speaking about the kingdom of heaven, he's really speaking about the authority of God's rule. And so when he says God's rule has drawn near, it's because Jesus has come as this great Messiah to begin to inaugurate all that is good. And so consequently, the ministry of Jesus needs to be understood, especially as he begins to share his teaching and the miracles that Jesus is going to perform under that larger umbrella of the kingdom of heaven. And so when it appears that Jesus has been spending some time teaching in the synagogues and preaching, it says, the good news of the kingdom and healing all kinds of sicknesses and disease. And as he does, the crowds begin to swell all the way from the northern part of Syria down to the southern part of Jerusalem in the territory of Judea. The Sea of Galilee, River Jordan, Dead Sea, all of those now in all that region, people are coming and they're not only hearing something that is compelling, but the miracles that Jesus speaks also underscores his authority as this Messiah, this promised Redeemer that is to come. And so as the crowds begin to swell and as they begin to come and draw near to Jesus, Jesus looks out and he begins to then call disciples to himself. You see at the end of chapter 4, Jesus is saying to Andrew and Peter, to James and John, the sons of Zebedee, to come, drop their nets, follow him, and he will make them fishers of men. And this calling then is found in throughout the scriptures, right? As Jesus is calling us into a relationship with him, saying, follow me. And he says, for I have come to give you life and to give it abundant. And so this idea then of of our journey walking with Jesus and allowing him to speak into our life and to speak about what is kind of hidden from our eyes. He's going to talk to us about this kingdom of heaven. And he begins then in the Sermon on the Mount by reciting these blessings. And the blessings are meant not so much to be a standard by which we are to live out our life, but the Beatitudes really are reflective of the people that have come and gathered around Jesus. These are people who are poor. These are people who have been mourning. The text says, right, that they brought all those who were sick and diseased. It says those who were, experiencing severe pain, seizures, paralyzed, those who were demon possessed, right? Wrapped in their own soul, right? This torment that's taking place. All these people are coming, and Jesus looks out to them and begins to talk about the blessings of what it means to be a part of the kingdom of heaven. Their experience now may fall short, but Jesus says, God has not forgotten you. Blessed are the poor, he says, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for you will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, those who are perhaps experiencing now that they have little power against the machinery of Rome, right? Of some of the injustices that they may be experiencing. But God said, blessed are the meek, for yours for you shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, who are not satisfied with the injustices that we find in the world, who are looking for something better, or are looking for this light to live by. It says, in that hunger and thirsting after God's will, God's ways, what it means to live rightly, God says, you will be filled. He says, blessed are the merciful, for you will be shown mercy. He says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. One of the things that I've already pointed out is that you do notice that the first beatitude and the last beatitude ends with the reference that yours is the kingdom of heaven. It says, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so this idea of the kingdom of heaven acts like two brackets that are being used now to define everything that's in the middle. And so what we're finding here is that in this kingdom of heaven, God is going to find a way for all people who feel in any way marginalized, that things will be made right. And so we're looking at this week verses in our text today. We're going to be looking at Matthew 5:11 through 16. So let me just read this to you, right? It says, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they prosecuted the prophets that were before you. You see that opening line there where it says, blessed are you when people insult, persecute, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. This is not a ninth beatitude. The eighth beatitude ended saying, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven speaks of the third person, them, they. Now, when you get to verse 11, it said, blessed are you. So now Jesus is narrowing the scope of his comments to those who are beginning to move closer into the circle of disciples that Jesus is teaching. Where if you paid attention in Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, it says that the crowds were following, but then Jesus began to speak to the disciples, people now who were putting themselves under the tutelage of Jesus. They were going to be apprentices now of Jesus. He was going to instruct them and teach them all about what it meant to be a citizen in this kingdom of heaven. So what Jesus does in verses 11 and 12 is now begin to speak more directly to those who have come and are, have made a decision to follow after Jesus. Now, the sincerity of that decision is going to be seen on how they continue to follow. But they've made this. They have come. There's an interest, and Jesus begins to teach them. And one of the things now is that he elaborates a little bit more on what it means to be persecuted for righteousness' sake, and he talks about experiencing something of what it means to be insulted and persecuted. People saying and falsely saying all kinds of evil against you because of me. Notice that it's the because of me. So Jesus is beginning to tell these citizens of heaven, not that heaven is going to exist right now. Jesus is telling them that, yes, there is going to be a whole change, regarding their experiences. But in this short run right now, there are going to be moments when they are going to be insulted, persecuted. People are going to say, people will falsely say all kinds of evil things against them because of their relationship with Jesus. I don't want to let this point go by, because very often, whether or not we say it to ourselves out loud, but deep down inside, we kind of think that if we live our life a certain way and we're pleasing God, then I should have like this smooth, it should be smooth sailing. Yeah, that little things could happen there, but nothing really big. That was one of the things when we lost Jared, a year and a half ago. People would inadvertently kind of hint that, oh, Pastor, we're so sorry for you. It's, you serve God and you're faithful to his word, and as if my calling insulated me from the same kind of struggles that everyone else is experiencing. My mom, she died with Alzheimer's. I had a brother who died with colon cancer. My sister, her diabetes went out of control, and I lost her during COVID. During those this past couple of years. Come on, everyone is going to experience turmoil. People have lost jobs, right? Health and relationships have been strained. Working with your, trying to raise your children in the best way possible. See, all these things, it's just part of being in this broken world. What Jesus is saying to us, though, is that he has come to change all of that. He's going to make this all right. But it's going to be a process as he works in space and time. In the mind of God, it's already been accomplished. God is looking at the end from the beginning. One of the interesting things that you can read in the book of Revelation, it says that God's people, it says their names are written in the Lamb's book of life. And what it says is their name has been written in the Lamb's book of life before the foundation of the world. So what does that say? That said that in the mind of God, he knows the end from the beginning. There's nothing that's catching God by surprise. You've heard me say this before. God will never say, oops, because he will never be caught by surprise. Never. He knows the end from the beginning. But God is choosing to work in space and time to bring people to a place where they can hear this good news of the kingdom and respond, because that, my friends, is what is going to be the pathway by which we will experience this life and this life abundant, this eternity that we're going to spend with him. So this good news of the kingdom that Jesus has come to pronounce and proclaim, people need to be receiving that. But in this world, he says, you're going to find moments that because of your association with me, you're going to be insulted and persecuted. And people are going to falsely say all kinds of evil against you. And why? Think about the message that Jesus is proclaiming. Is it really something that is so foreign and terrible? when he says that you ought to love your neighbor as you love yourself? When he says that we ought to forgive? No. See, the issue comes when God begins to lay claim over one's life and begins to direct them and saying, this is evil, this is good, this is righteous. This is the way that if you're going to follow me, you need to go. And then at that moment, we're making that decision saying, no, I'd rather go my way than God's way. And then when we stand, when those believers stand, all of a sudden they, by their very presence, they're people are looking at them as judging them because they are choosing to go in a completely different direction. When that happens, of course, you're going to get this sense of people falsely saying things against you. Come on, how many times, in your own walk with Jesus, you're trying to do the right thing and people are accusing you, like thinking that you're better than them, you're so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good, right? You just believe in fairy tales. The world's not going to give you anything that you don't get for yourself. And you begin to realize, like the ways of this kingdom of heaven are flying in the face of the ways of this world. And then Jesus is very clear when he's telling us we are not to be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our minds. So what does he say in verse 12? He says, rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Think about that. You have examples like Jeremiah, right? Who was tormented. Think about it. Jeremiah wrote the book of Lamentations, this book of sorrows, because of the way the people of God, reacted to the message that God brought. Jeremiah would bring a scroll, and the kings of Israel would burn them. They wouldn't even want to listen to him. They would throw him in a cistern, and leave him for dead. Or how about Elijah the prophet, right? And the constant interaction that he had with King Ahab, an evil, vile king, and yet Elijah would speak the words of God to him, and he would call him a troubler of Israel, saying, "Why are you always causing trouble? Why are you saying these bad things about me?" Instead of listening to what Elijah said, so that he might find favor with God, that his soul would rest at peace with God. But no, not King Ahab. Better off trying to kill the prophet than listening to what he has to say. And Jesus says, whenever that happens, do you realize that you're in good company? Because they did that they did that in generations past to those who I sent out. So why is God doing this? Because every generation he's giving a fresh witness. Every generation he's giving opportunity. Because, the day is going to come when those opportunities are going to be gone. The days are going to come when the Bible says that Jesus will return. And when he does, it says he will come to fulfill all things. That means that there is going to be the creation of a new heaven and a new earth, that these bodies of ours are going to be transformed, all things made new. So in this moment then that we live, you and I become that voice, just like the prophets of old. I have much to talk to you about in this regard in the days to come, this week, as we talk about this idea of being salt and light. Because Jesus is saying to us that while we may be experiencing sometimes a pushback of the world, he tells us what it means to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is going to tell us what it means to be salt and light. And we're going to spend a lot of our time this week looking into what does it mean to be salt and light. And there are numerous passages that we're going to take a look at. All right. So I hope that you just continue this week, and hopefully some of these passages will just become a real source of strength for you. You know, today is Martin Luther King Day. For many, you have the day off. Some maybe you're still off at work. But I thought I went back and I read one of Martin Luther King's most famous letters. I don't know about you, but sometimes you might use a name like Martin Luther King, and you get bits and pieces of what he was about. But if you're home today, if you were to Google letters from a Birmingham jail, letters from a Birmingham jail, uh, it is something really to read. And in light of so much of this unrest that's taking place in our world, to hear how Martin Luther King frames this is really sobering, and it might give you some insight into his soul. I thought I would end our time today by reading an excerpt from this letter, because in this letter he begins to speak about the church, and the whole context is one in which sanitation workers were not getting equal pay for the work that they were doing. They were marginalized, and all because they were African American. Because of the color of their skin, there was so much injustice that was being perpetrated against them. And it seemed that all the powers that be were conspiring to keep them in that situation. And so Martin Luther King, in peaceful protest, was just, pressing his finger into the problem. He would tell people, he said, look, we come in these peaceful protests because you can't use immoral means towards a moral end. Like the end just doesn't justify the means, right? The means are important too. And so you can't think about Jesus's words, or the words you find in the New Testament where it says you can't repay evil for evil, but you got to return evil with good. See, that is part of what it means to be this upside down kingdom. In the world, they seem to give all praise to this power, right? Not recognizing that the exercise of that power in ways that are unrighteous, they're going to pay for that. They're going to be judged for that. And God is saying, you do realize that there is going to come a day when this judgment people will experience great loss. But those who are living by this kingdom, the light and momentary trials that we find now, God says, are going to not be compared with the eternal glory that will be yours. So it's living then this life with heaven in view. So I thought I would just bring you to this text from the book, from the letter from a Birmingham jail, and listen to Martin Luther King as he speaks about the church in terms of it being this salt, this light in the world, right? That they're making their presence known for good, which is what I believe Jesus is saying here in these texts. And I thought it would be a good way for us on this Martin Luther King Day to just listen to a couple of these words. So let me read them for you this morning. He says, in deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church. But be assured that my tears have been tears of love. There can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love. Yes, I love the church. How could I do otherwise? I am in the rather unique position of being the son, the grandson, and the great-grandson of preachers. Yes, I see the church as the body of Christ, but oh, how we have blemished and scarred that body through social neglect and through fear of being nonconformists. There was a time when the church was very powerful, in the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermostat that transformed the mores of society. Whenever the early Christians entered a town, the people in power became disturbed and immediately sought to convict the Christians for being disturbers of the peace and outside agitators. But the Christians pressed on in the conviction that they were a colony of heaven, called to obey God rather than men. Small in number, they were big in commitment. They were too God intoxicated to be astronomically intimidated. By their effort and example, they brought an end to such ancient evils as infanticide and gladiatorial contests. Things are different now. So often, the contemporary church is a weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. So often, it is an arch defender of the status quo. Far from being disturbed by the presence of the church, the power structure of the average community is consoled by the church's silent and often even vocal sanction of things as they are. But the judgment of God is upon the church as never before. If today's church does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, it will lose its authenticity, forfeit the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. Every day, I meet young people whose disappointment with the church has turned into outright disgust. Perhaps I have once again been too optimistic. Is organized religion too inextricably bound to the status quo to save our nation and the world? Perhaps I must turn my faith to the inner spiritual church, the church within the church, as the true ecclesia and the hope of the world. But again, I am thankful to God that some noble souls from the ranks of organized religion have broken loose from the paralyzing chains of conformity and joined us as active partners in the struggle for freedom. They have left their secure congregations and walked the streets of Albany, Georgia with us. They have gone down the highways of the South on tortuous rides for freedom. Yes, they have gone to jail with us. Some have been dismissed from their churches, have lost the support of their bishops and fellow ministers. But they have acted in the faith that right defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. Their witness has been the spiritual salt that has preserved the true meaning of the gospel in these troubled times. They have carved a tunnel of hope through the dark mountain of disappointment. I hope the church as a whole will meet the challenge of this decisive hour. But even if the church does not come to the aid of justice, I have no despair about the future. I have no fear about the outcome of our struggle in Birmingham, even if our motives are at present misunderstood. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson etched the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence across the pages of history, we were here. For more than 2 centuries, our forebears labored in this country without wages. They made cotton king. They built the homes of their masters while suffering gross injustice and shameful humiliation. And yet, out of a bottomless vitality, they continued to thrive and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands. My friends, there are times that God is calling us into the world to make sure that we are countercultural, that we maintain our fidelity to God's will and his ways, that we always seek to do the right, the good. And part of being this salt and light is precisely that. We are agents in the world that are meant to permeate all levels of society, and not by just saying good things, but by living them out, by being agents of change as people see the way in which we take the good news of Jesus and apply it with patience and love and grace. I pray that today you go out even that much more convicted to seize the day. Appreciate the mornings. Even on a crazy day like this, sometimes it's good to be inside and just find some time to personally reflect on the good that God is doing. My friends, God bless you. Glad to be a part of this community. Seize the day and always remember that God is good all the time. Lord willing, we'll spend more time tomorrow as we look at this passage from Matthew chapter 5, verses 11 through 16. God bless.